Radio check. This is Captain Nightwhisper. They call Afghanistan the graveyard of empires. The British bled there. The Soviets left thousands of their sons buried in the snow-capped peaks. And when we arrived, we thought our technology, our drones, and our night vision would make us different. We were arrogant. We thought we were fighting insurgents in the dirt. We didn't realize that in some of those forgotten valleys, the dirt itself is alive, and it doesn't care about the flags on our shoulders. Tonight's file is highly classified. It comes from a former operator of a Tier 1 Special Forces unit. What he saw in a remote, unmapped village off the Panjshir Valley was scrubbed from every official after-action report. They said the enemy was wiped out by a rival faction. The truth is, they were wiped out by something that has been defending those mountains since before the invention of gunpowder. Lock your doors, check your corners, and step into the dark with me. Mission log, Operation Black Garden. Location, Hindu Kush Mountains, northeastern Afghanistan. If you look at a map of the Panjshir Valley, you'll see a jagged wound in the earth, surrounded by peaks that scrape the sky at 18,000 feet. It's a beautiful, unforgiving place. My team, OD 73 Bravo, was operating deep in the Hindu Kush. We weren't there to win hearts and minds. We were hunting a high-value Taliban commander who had been moving weapons through the high passes. Intelligence tracked his unit, about 30 heavily armed fighters, moving toward a remote settlement not listed on any modern map. The locals called the area Siyah-Bagh, the Black Garden. Our Afghan interpreter, a seasoned fighter named Tariq, refused to say the name out loud. When command ordered us to pursue the target into the valley, Tariq physically shook. "You do not go to the Black Garden with rifles, brother," he warned me, staring at the distant, jagged peaks. "The people there, they do not need our protection, and they do not forgive trespassers." I told him we had orders. 30 insurgents were heading to a civilian village. We had to intercept them. We deployed via MH-47 Chinook, dropping 5 miles away from the village under the cover of a moonless night. The plan was to hike in, establish an overwatch position on the ridge, and call in an airstrike if the target was confirmed. But at 0200 hours, 2 miles out from the village, our comms officer picked up a localized radio transmission. It was the Taliban unit we were hunting. They weren't communicating tactically. They were screaming. Through the static, Tariq translated the frantic Pashto echoing from the radio speaker. "They are in the walls. Fall back. Shoot the shadows. Shoot the..." Gunfire. Heavy machine gun fire, followed by the sickening crunch of breaking bone. And then, the radio went dead. Not just dead. The signal was completely swallowed, replaced by a low, rhythmic humming sound that made the fillings in my teeth vibrate. "Command, this is Bravo Actual," I whispered into my mic. "We have a situation. Be advised, target package may have engaged an unknown hostile force." "Copy, Bravo," the radio crackled. "Proceed with caution. Assess and report." We clicked our night vision goggles down. The world turned a grainy, glowing green, and we marched toward the Black Garden. The closer we got to Siyah-Bagh, the more the environment felt wrong. In the mountains of Afghanistan, the night is never truly silent. There is always the howl of the wind rushing through the canyons, the shifting of loose scree, or the distant call of a predator. But as we crested the final ridge overlooking the village, the air went completely dead. The wind stopped. The temperature plummeted, dropping maybe 20 degrees in a matter of minutes. My breath plumed in the cold air, thick enough to obscure my NVGs. "You feel that?" my point man Jackson whispered. "It feels heavy, like we're walking underwater." He was right. The atmospheric pressure felt immense. My ears popped, and a dull ache settled at the base of my skull. We went prone on the ridge, setting up our sniper systems and observation scopes. Below us, nestled in a bowl-shaped depression, surrounded by ancient, towering rock walls, was the village. It wasn't a modern settlement. There were no power lines, no satellite dishes, no vehicles. Just a cluster of stone and mud brick houses built directly into the side of the mountain, looking like they had been there since the Bronze Age. There were no lights, no fires burning in the hearths. "Do you see the enemy, Sergeant?" Tariq asked, his voice trembling. He hadn't raised his rifle. He was clutching a set of prayer beads. Scanning now, I said, switching my scope from night vision to thermal imaging. I expected to see the glowing white silhouettes of 30 Taliban fighters taking defensive positions. I expected to see the heat signatures of their technical trucks or the warm barrels of their heavy weapons. Instead, I saw a slaughterhouse. Good God, Jackson muttered, looking through his own thermal optics. What did this? The valley floor was littered with bodies. Through the thermal scope, fresh corpses glow a bright, searing white against the dark, cool background of the earth. But these bodies, they were already cooling. They were a dull, sickly orange, fading fast into the cold blue of the rocks. They had only stopped broadcasting on the radio 20 minutes ago. A human body doesn't lose its heat that fast unless it's been drained. I zoomed in on a cluster of bodies near the village entrance. They weren't just dead, they were dismantled. One heat signature showed a torso on the roof of a mud hut, while its legs were scattered 30 yards away. Another body seemed to be embedded inside a solid stone wall, as if the rock had temporarily turned to liquid, swallowed the man, and solidified again. There were no crater marks from mortars, no signs of an explosion, no bullet casings reflecting in the moonlight. "Command, this is Bravo," I breathed into the radio. "Target package is neutralized. I repeat, all 30 insurgents are KIA, but we have no idea who hit them." "Understood, Bravo. Can you identify the engaging force? Are there survivors in the village?" I swept my scope over the mud brick houses, and then my blood ran cold. "I have movement," I whispered. "Center of the village, the town square." In the middle of the settlement, sitting in a perfect circle on the dirt, were children, maybe 10 or 12 of them. They looked to be between the ages of 6 and 10, dressed in traditional ragged clothing. But it was their thermal signature that made my stomach drop. They didn't glow white or orange with human body heat. Through the thermal lens, the children were pitch black. They were colder than the freezing rocks around them. They were absorbing the heat of the environment and they were playing a game. I watched in silent horror as these heat-void entities sat amongst the butchered remains of 30 hardened combatants, calmly passing smooth river stones to each other. Click, clack, click, clack. The sound carried up the ridge, impossibly loud in the dead air. "They aren't children," Tariq whimpered, pressing his face into the dirt, refusing to look through the optics. "I told you, the Black Garden is protected. The Djinn, they wear the faces of the innocent, so you do not run until it is too late." One of the children, a little girl with a black void where her thermal signature should be, stopped passing the stones. She turned her head, slowly, unnaturally, and she looked directly up the ridge, right into the lens of my sniper scope. Across 500 yards of pitch-black darkness, she smiled. "She sees us," Jackson panicked, his finger tightening on his trigger. "Sergeant, she's looking right at me." "Hold your fire," I ordered, my heart hammering against my ribs. "Do not engage." But it was too late. The children stood up in unison, and the shadows cast by the moon behind them didn't follow their movements. The shadows detached from their feet and started slithering up the mountain towards us. Mission log, Operation Black Garden. Location, Siyah-Bagh, village perimeter. Bravo Actual, this is command. We are blind on drone coverage due to atmospheric interference. We need visual confirmation on the high-value target. Move in and secure the site. Acknowledge. I stared at the radio. Every instinct I had acquired over 5 deployments told me to turn around, hike back to the extraction point, and call in an artillery strike on this whole grid square. But you don't disobey a direct order from command because you saw some weird shadows. "Copy." "Command," I replied, my voice tighter than I wanted it to be. "Bravo is moving to secure the village." Tariq grabbed my shoulder. His eyes were wide, white circles in the dark. "Sergeant, please. The radio is dead down there. If we cross the threshold of the village, we leave the world of men. We will be in their domain." "Keep your rifle up, Tariq," I told him, chambering around. "We go in, we find the commander's body, we take photos, and we leave. 5 minutes. Let's move." We descended the ridge in a tactical diamond formation. As soon as our boots hit the sandy dirt of the valley floor, the silence became absolute. It wasn't just quiet, it was a physical weight pressing against our eardrums. The ambient noise of the Hindu Kush, the wind, the insects, simply ceased to exist. We approached the first bodies. Up close, the thermal nightmare we saw from the ridge was infinitely worse in reality. I knelt next to a Taliban fighter. He was a hardened veteran holding an AK-47, but his rifle was bent, not melted, not snapped. The steel barrel was bent at a perfect 90-degree angle, like it was made of warm clay. I checked his face. His jaw was unhinged, frozen in a silent, agonizing scream. His eyes were completely white, the blood vessels ruptured, but there wasn't a single drop of blood on the ground, not a single bullet wound on his body. "Sergeant, look at this," Jackson called out from a mud brick wall a few yards away. His voice was shaking. I walked over. Another insurgent was pinned against the wall, but he wasn't pinned to it. He was in it. The man's torso and right arm were jutting out of the solid stone and mud, as if the wall had briefly turned into liquid, swallowed him halfway, and solidified again. The rock was perfectly molded around his ribcage. "Physics don't work like this," Jackson whispered, poking the solid stone wall with his combat knife. "This isn't a weapon. This is magic." "There is no magic, Jackson," I snapped, trying to keep my own panic down. "Just technology we don't understand. Keep moving to the square." But as we stepped past the fused body, a sharp, rhythmic sound cut through the heavy silence. Click, clack, click, clack. We had reached the center of the village. The children were waiting for us. There were 12 of them. They sat in a perfect circle in the dust, right in the middle of the town square. Around them lay the twisted, mangled remains of the rest of the Taliban unit. It looked like a bomb had gone off in a slaughterhouse. Yet the children were perfectly clean. Not a speck of dust or blood on their ragged clothes. They were passing smooth black river stones to one another. Over and over, a hypnotic, endless rhythm. Click, clack, click, clack. We fanned out, our weapons trained on them. But you can't aim an M4 carbine at a 7-year-old girl. Your brain just won't let you do it. "Tariq," I whispered, keeping my eyes on the children. "Talk to them. Ask them where the adults are." Tariq took a step forward. He didn't raise his rifle. He lowered his head submissively and spoke in a trembling, formal dialect of Pashto. The children stopped passing the stones. All 12 of them turned their heads toward Tariq at the exact same time. The synchronization was robotic, flawless. Under the pale moonlight, I finally saw their faces clearly. They looked like normal Afghan children. Beautiful, really. But their eyes, there were no whites, no irises, just pure, unreflecting black voids. Looking into their eyes was like looking down a dry well at midnight. The little girl in the center opened her mouth. When she spoke, her lips moved, but the voice didn't come from her throat. It came from everywhere. It echoed off the canyon walls, resonated in the dirt beneath our boots, and buzzed directly inside our skulls. It was a chorus of voices, some ancient and booming, others whispering and raspy. "We are the adults." The voices vibrated in my mind. "We are the elders. We are the first breath of the desert and the last gasp of the dying." Jackson stumbled backward, raising his rifle. "What the hell is that? Sergeant, what the hell is that?" "You wear the metal of the new empires," the little girl continued, her black eyes locking onto me. "Like the red stars before you, like the brass buttons before them. You bring iron to a garden of ash." "We don't want any trouble," I said aloud, my voice sounding pathetic and small against the overwhelming pressure of their telepathy. "We are hunting the men who came here tonight, the men who meant to harm you." A small boy to the left of the girl tilted his head. His neck cracked loudly. "Harm us?" The voices laughed. It sounded like grinding tectonic plates. "The flies do not harm the spider. They only feed it." "Sergeant, we need to leave," Tariq pleaded, tears streaming down his face. "Now, please." I looked at the twisted bodies of the Taliban fighters. I looked at the black-eyed children. "Fall back," I ordered. "Slowly. Do not turn your backs to them." We started walking backward. 1 step, 2 steps. But Jackson was young. It was his first deployment. The pressure, the voices, the impossible horror of the fused bodies, it broke him. He didn't just walk backward, he panicked. He spun around to run, and in his panic, his heavy combat boot kicked one of the smooth black stones the children had been playing with. The stone skittered across the dirt. The silence that followed was the loudest sound I have ever heard. The little girl looked at the displaced stone, then she looked at Jackson. "You broke the circle." The temperature plummeted again. Our breath froze midair, falling like snow. The shadows cast by the children, which were long and stretched out by the moonlight, suddenly detached from their bodies. They peeled off the ground like black liquid standing up. The shadows grew, rising 10, 15 feet into the air, towering over us. They had no faces, no distinct features, just jagged edges of pure, light-consuming darkness. "Contact!" Jackson screamed, opening fire. Bang, bang, bang! His .5.56 rounds tore through the shadow entity approaching him. The bullets hit the mud wall behind it, kicking up dust. But the shadow didn't even flinch. It wasn't physical. "Cease fire! Cease fire!" I yelled, knowing our weapons were useless. The shadow lunged at Jackson. It didn't bite him or punch him. It just passed through him. Jackson stopped shooting. He dropped his rifle. He stood perfectly still, his eyes wide open. "Jackson!" I yelled, reaching out to grab his vest. When my hand touched his shoulder, he felt like a block of solid ice. Frost was rapidly forming on his tactical gear, spreading across his face, freezing his eyelashes. He opened his mouth to scream, but only a dry, rattling hiss came out. The shadow entity had drained the thermal energy straight out of his body in a fraction of a second. Jackson collapsed into the dirt, stiff as a board. Two more shadows detached from the children and began slithering toward me and Tariq. They moved with a terrifying, jerky speed, like a corrupted video file skipping frames. I drew my sidearm, purely out of instinct, but my hands were shaking so violently I could barely hold it. We were going to die here. We were going to be fused into the rocks, or frozen from the inside out. Just another secret buried in the graveyard of empires. Then Tariq stepped in front of me. He dropped his rifle. He dropped to his knees in the dirt, throwing his hands wide open, exposing his chest to the towering shadows. And he began to scream. Not in terror, but in defiance. He didn't speak Pashto. He didn't speak Arabic. He was chanting in a language that sounded ancient, guttural, and harsh, a language older than the mountains themselves. A language he had warned me he knew, but prayed he'd never have to use. The shadows froze, inches from his face. The little girl with the black eyes stood up. Mission log, Operation Black Garden. Location, Siyah-Bagh, town square. Tariq's voice echoed through the silent valley, harsh and rhythmic. He was screaming syllables that tore at his throat, words that felt too heavy for a human mouth to form. It was a language I had never heard in all my years in the Middle East. It didn't sound like Pashto, Dari, or Arabic. It sounded like the grinding of ancient stones. The towering shadow entities stopped. They hovered inches from Tariq's exposed chest, their edges vibrating violently, like a swarm of black locusts held back by an invisible glass wall. The little girl with the black, void eyes slowly walked toward us. She moved gracefully, stepping over the mutilated bodies of the Taliban fighters, as if they were just fallen leaves. She stopped right in front of Tariq. She looked down at him, then up at me. "He speaks the tongue of the first men." The legion of voices resonated in my skull, softer this time, but infinitely more dangerous. "But you both wear the cloth of the invaders. You bring iron. You bring fire. We did not spill blood in your garden," Tariq gasped out in English, tears freezing on his cheeks. "We did not pull the trigger. We only followed the dead. And yet, your boy broke the circle." The girl pointed a small, pale finger toward Jackson. I looked at my point man. He was still kneeling in the dirt, his rifle at his feet, but he wasn't shivering anymore. His skin had turned a pale, sickly gray, and frost covered his tactical gear. He looked like a statue carved out of dirty ice. "Let me take him," I pleaded, my voice cracking. "Let me take my man, and we will never return. I swear to God we will wipe this valley from our maps." The little girl smiled. It wasn't a human smile. It was the smile of a predator that had already won. "Your God does not watch this valley, Sergeant Miller," the voices whispered. "We do." The girl reached out and touched Jackson's frozen cheek. Instantly, the frost on his body rapidly expanded. I heard the sickening sound of his gear, his uniform, and his flesh hardening. He wasn't just frozen, he was calcifying. He was turning into the very stone of the mountain. "Jackson!" I yelled, taking a step forward. "No," Tariq screamed, tackling me to the dirt. "If you touch him, you stay with him. He is not your soldier anymore, Sergeant. He is a monument." I struggled against Tariq, the fundamental rule of the Rangers. Leave no man behind, screaming in my head. But as I looked at Jackson, I realized Tariq was right. Half of Jackson's face was already merging with the dirt and the stone wall behind him. The black garden was absorbing him. He fired a weapon in a place of absolute peace, and the garden was demanding fertilizer. The girl turned her black eyes back to me. "The toll is paid," the voices hummed in my mind, causing a sharp spike of pain behind my eyes. "The boy who brought fire will remain here in the cold, to guard the circle he broke. You and the speaker of the old tongue may go." The shadows towering over us began to recede, slithering backward and reattaching themselves to the feet of the children. "But you must run," the girl said, her voice singular now, sounding just like a normal 7-year-old child. "Because the sun will rise soon, and the others, the ones who sleep beneath the dirt, they are much hungrier than we are." The ground beneath us began to tremble. A low, guttural vibration echoed from the deep cave systems surrounding the village. "Run, Sergeant!" Tariq dragged me to my feet. "Move!" I didn't look back at Jackson. I couldn't. We turned and sprinted toward the ridge. Mission log, evacuation. Location, ridgeline, Hindu Kush. We ran like cowards. I'm not ashamed to admit it. We threw our heavy gear, our night vision, our extra plates, our ammo, into the dirt to lighten the load. We scrambled up the steep, rocky slope, our lungs burning, our hands bleeding from the sharp shale. Behind us, the clicking of the stones started again. Much faster this time. Frantic, click, clack, click, clack, and then the screaming started. It wasn't human. It was a massive, echoing screech from the depths of the valley that shook the dust off the mountain. Whatever lived under the Black Garden was waking up. We reached the crest of the ridge. The exact moment we stepped over the invisible threshold, the world snapped back into place. The physical pressure in my head vanished. The biting, howling wind of the Hindu Kush hit us in the face, and my radio exploded with static. "Bravo Actual, this is Command. Do you copy? Bravo Actual, we lost your signal for 2 hours. Sitrep, over." I collapsed into the snow, gasping for air, staring down into the valley. The sun was just beginning to peek over the eastern peaks, casting a pale gray light into the depression below. I looked through my standard binoculars. There was no village, there were no mud brick houses, no mangled bodies of 30 Taliban fighters, no frozen statue of Jackson. There was just an empty, barren basin of gray rocks and dead dirt. The Black Garden was gone. It had swallowed the evidence, swallowed the enemy, and swallowed my point man. I pressed the transmit button on my radio. My hand was still shaking. "Command, this is Bravo Actual," I said, my voice dead and hollow. "Target package is eliminated, but we have a casualty. Jackson is KIA, body unrecoverable." "Copy, Bravo, stand by for dust-off. Helos are inbound." I looked at Tariq. He was sitting on a rock, staring at his hands. His hair, which had been jet black a few hours ago, was now streaked with stark white. He looked at me, his eyes hollow. "I told you, Sergeant," he whispered. "In Afghanistan, the modern world has never fully displaced the old ways. Some things cannot be shot. They can only be survived." Sergeant Miller was honorably discharged 6 months later, diagnosed with severe PTSD. Officially, the military recorded Private Jackson's death as a casualty of a Taliban ambush. They said an IED vaporized his remains, making recovery impossible. But Miller knows the truth. And so does Tariq. Jackson is still there, frozen in the dirt, a permanent guard dog for an ancient entity that wears the faces of innocent children. We spend billions of dollars on stealth bombers, thermal optics, and satellite surveillance. We think we own the night. But there are pockets of this world, deep in the valleys, high in the mountains, hidden in the dense forests, where our technology is nothing but a child's toy. Places where the old gods still demand respect and blood. So the next time you hear a strange sound in the dark, don't assume you can fight it. Sometimes, the only tactical advantage you have is to run. I am Captain Nightwhisper. Stay vigilant. Keep your circle unbroken. Good night.